everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited today. We have a very special episode of the podcast. We are looking back at the year 2009, 10 years ago, the best of the year 2009. This is really always a fun exercise to do every year. And I'm Rachel, and Conrado is here.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so this is our third year doing this.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's pretty fun. The thing I like the most about it is it gets me to watch things that I would never, watch otherwise, and kind of look back at the films that impacted me as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like rewatching all the movies that I liked back then. Also, the movies that I didn't love, but there's a couple movies on my list that I have rediscovered through this rewatch, and that are now like some of my favorites. So I'm always interested in doing that, and it's fun to come up on the show and talk about it.
Yes, 2009 was an interesting year in movies. The big let's talk about some of the big Oscars that year. We had The Hurt Locker, which you actually included in your list, the 2008 list.
Yeah, that's if I can explain that's just to keep, I don't know, it's just I have to go by the original very first release date, whatever is listed in IMDb when we do this list, just because I don't want anything to slip through the cracks, like things that didn't get released in the US or things like that,
Mm-hmm.
So I try to go by that. And that's why Hurt Locker, even though it was released in the US in 2009 and won the Oscar, was in my list for 2008.
Okay, that makes sense. And but it won the Best Picture for 2009. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a good winner. It's one of the better ones, I think, in the recent years. Also, the first movie directed by a woman to win, and obviously Catherine Bigelow won Best Director as well. And I think it's a really good movie. I mean, it was on my list for the best of 2008, and it probably would have also cracked my list this year if I had, included it.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a pretty good movie. It's a pretty intimate war type movie where you really get in the heads of the soldiers, and I appreciate that about it.
Yes, definitely. It's more of a character study of this guy who's, addicted to being a soldier and, dealing with these bombs and high adrenaline stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like it. I think it's a great movie. If people haven't seen it, they should check it out.
Yeah. And then also it was we had Jeff Bridges for Crazy Heart, Sandra Bullock for The Blind Side. You had Monique for Precious,
right?
And then Christoph Waltz for Inglorious Basterds. So There we go. And yeah, you had Hurt Locker and Precious taking the screenplay awards, and you had Up for Best Animated Feature Film. We're going to talk about a lot about animated films. This was, in my opinion, the best year ever for animated movies. It was just incredible.
All right. I agree with you that it's a great year.
Yeah.
The best year, maybe. I could see that. I can see that argument.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to talk about a lot of animated movies today.
Yes. And so it was really exciting on that level. And pretty good year at the Oscars, I would say. And I guess a lot of people don't really like The Blind Side, but I like it. And I think Sandra Bullock, it was a true sort of movie star that year with The Blind Side and with The Proposal, which I actually think really funny. So
that's a big year for her. I love Sandra Bullock, but you can count me with the people who don't really like The Blind Side. I am not into that movie.
I like it. I think it's a nice family story. And I like the real family is really sweet, and I don't know, so I enjoy it. The box office, the top 10 was, you had Sherlock Holmes at number 10.
Okay.
You had Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Squeakquel at number 9.
Classic.
Yes.
Obviously, it's going to be number 1 in both our lists.
That's
so
right.
We'll be talking about that later.
Number 8, you had The Blind Side.
All right.
Number 7 is Star Trek.
Huge hit, right? Like that's a little. Back then, it was also a little surprising. 255 million for The Blind Side.
Mm-hmm.
Sandra Bullock.
Yeah,
it's crazy. That was a huge success. That has to have played a role in her winning the Oscar too.
Oh,
it was
for
just
sure.
such her year.
Yeah, she was a real movie star that year. I mean, it was we don't see that as much these days, where, I don't know, someone just on their name alone not only gets I don't know, I think she gives a pretty good performance, but I think it was just her year, and people at a certain point, people bonded with Sandy, and, and they were gonna find a way to get her Oscar, I think, one way or another.
I think she had been like kind of out of it for a while, right?
Yeah.
I remember that in 2009 it was like a bit of a Sandra Bullock is back and she's a movie star and we love her so much and whatever,
Yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely a moment for her.
And the Proposal is 16th place of the year, but it did very well, especially for the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And then number 6 was The Hangover.
Oh, The Hangover. That's a 2009 movie.
Yeah,
there was one.
I've never seen it. I've never seen any of them.
Yeah, you're not missing much, but it's like, that is just such a movie from 2009. Like,
Yeah.
Some of the movies that we're going to be talking about, I think I also feel like are such a time capsule for that time.
Yeah. So number 5 is Up.
All right.
Exciting. Number 4, Twilight Saga New Moon. Your favorite. Number 3 is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Number 2 was Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. And number 1 was Avatar, was number 1.
Right, the big Avatar.
Yes. What are you...
Highest grossing movie of all time at that point, right?
Yeah, I think it still is. I don't think it's been beaten.
Yeah, I thought Force Awakens overtook it, but maybe that's not true. It did. Avatar is now number 2. It's sandwiched between Force Awakens and Black Panther.
Well, what do you think about Avatar?
I think Avatar is fine. I think it's fun. I think the effects are cool. The action is good because James Cameron's a good director. I think it's a fine movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fact that it was such a huge hit, and so it got the Oscar nominations. It didn't win, but at some point it seemed like it was going to, and everyone was talking about Avatar and the 3D and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of got blown up over. Like it was, the word's not coming to me, like overpraised, I guess. I don't know. It was made too much of a big deal.
Yeah, I like Avatar just fine. I think it's too long for the story that they had to tell. I think that's the biggest flaw with it. If the movie was in 90 minutes, or 2 hours, it would be a lot more palatable. But it's too long.
I can see that. It's definitely a big overstuffed movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the script is, a lot of people have talked about it. The script is not anything, that's going to impress you too much. It's, it's in service of the action and the effects and whatever. But, I don't think it's a bad movie by any means.
Right. I don't know. I just think it would be way better if it was shorter. But I guess most movies are probably like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true for most movies, I think.
So, yes. There, as far as the real stinkers of that year, we had Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, which
Terrible.
is rough. We had All About Steve, which was an interesting
Oh,
movie because
Sandra Bullock.
Sandra Bullock got the Razzie and the Oscar in the same year, and she, I think, was there to accept it, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
And then a movie that I really dislike called The Ugly Truth was one which Gerard Butler, he actually can act, but man, has he made terrible choices.
Well, this is another like flashback to 2009 when The Ugly Truth, starring Gerard Butler and Katherine Heigl. We were at the Katherine Heigl romantic comedy
Yeah.
era back then.
And there was one called Old Dogs, which is really rough with Robin Williams and John Travolta.
Right.
It's not great. And and Bride Wars was another terrible romantic comedy that year.
I saw that. That was really rough.
It was.
How about The Lovely Bones? Have you seen that? Peter Jackson.
Oh, I haven't, but it sounded terrible.
Yeah, that's another clunker.
Mm-hmm.
Saoirse Ronan plays this girl who goes to the afterlife and has to like solve the mystery of her own death or something like that. It was not good.
Yeah, I was really bummed about The Confessions of a Shopaholic because I love the books. Sophie Kinsella is such a funny writer, and she does such a good job of taking sort of an issue of the day and crafting a delightful but still somewhat insightful romantic chick lit, I guess, book, for lack of a better phrase.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did in the movie is they combined two of her books into this one movie, and they just removed all of sort of the more biting aspects of it. They removed all of her satire and just made it so generic and lame. And it was frustrating because I just feel like that, especially that first Shopaholic book, it's all there. It's like the perfect romantic comedy. It's just laid out for you. You don't have, and so I felt like they almost had to go out of their way to make it so bad, which was just frustrating as a fan of the books for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a terrible Underworld movie that year. There were definitely the flops. That Chipmunks movie, I can't believe that made that much money.
Those movies are still going on, right? There's still new movies coming in the Alvin franchise.
I forget when the last one is, but there were like 4 or 5. I also really dislike 2012 with Roland Emmerich. Not for me.
John Cusack, I think.
Yeah, his movies just exhaust me. I don't like them. And there was also Paul Blart Mall Cop that year.
The great Kevin James.
Yes. And Terminator Salvation.
Oof.
Not my favorite.
Okay, so that's another flashback. Do you remember Terminator Salvation was the movie where they got the clip of Christian Bale screaming at the cinematographer or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been 10 years since then. Isn't that crazy?
Crazy.
Time flies.
Also, another terrible movie that year is X-Men Origins Wolverine. One of the worst comic book movies I've ever seen. Is just terrible. So
and remember there was a leak of that movie in which the effects weren't finished, and some people were like, I don't know if you found out about that, but the movie leaked online or something, and there was a whole cut of the movie that was basically the final cut, but with no effects, so you could see all the green screens and that sort of thing.
Oh,
I don't know if you knew about that back then. That was kind of funny when that happened.
I forgot about that, but yeah, it actually starts out decent, but then it's really, really bad. But let's dive into our lists. This will be really fun. So, okay, my number 10 is called Young Victoria. I love my costume dramas, and this is obviously about Queen Victoria, and I love the show Victoria on PBS. I think it's so well done, and I think she's a really interesting person, a really interesting character, and it's really a movie about a marriage, and Victoria and Albert had such a real love match and a real connection, and the way the ebbs and flows to their marriage, I think is really interesting and moving. And Emily Blunt is so great in as Queen Victoria. She's just wonderful, and I think it has one of the best like proposal scenes in a movie. It's so good, and I just really the costumes, Sandy Powell, incredible, and I just love it. I think it's a really good movie.
All right. Well, this is the only movie on your list that I haven't seen.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is because I have a personal grudge against it because it won the Best Costume Design Oscar over a different movie that I think deserves it, and it's going to be later in my list. So we will be talking about that movie later.
But the costumes are stunning, and I don't know. I really like it.
I mean, Sandy Powell is an amazing genius. I'm sure she did a great job, but the costumes in the movie that I'm talking about, they're just like some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. So,
well, and just Emily Blunt is she's just phenomenal. And so anyway, I really recommend checking it out if you like romances, movies about marriage, and costume dramas, period pieces, whatever you want to call them. It's a really good one. So what do you have at number 10?
My number 10 is a movie that didn't come out in the US until 2015, actually. And that is the movie about Ellie. It is a movie by the Iranian filmmaker Asghar Farhadi, who some people might know him from, he's won 2 foreign language film Oscars for A Separation and most recently for The Salesman a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is kind of the movie that he made before A Separation, before he really broke through, but this did play at the Berlin Film Festival and got really good reviews, and I think it was almost like a springboard into his next movie, which was bigger and really gave him his international break. But anyway, this movie is great. It's called About Ellie, and it's basically this group of friends that go to spend the weekend at the beach house, and one of these friends is this woman, Seppi Day, who is sort of trying to play matchmaker with 2 of her friends. And what happens is that halfway through the movie, one of the friends, her name is Ellie, is the one that she's trying to hook up with one of her other friends. She disappears. And it's a whole story about how what exactly happened with Ellie. And what happens next is that you realize that because they're living in this sort of authoritarian, totalitarian government in Iran, the system has made it so that you can't really do the things that you want to do or can be honest. So you have to like lie all the time about really little things in order to, to just live your life. And it ends up making it so that everything is a lie and you cannot really you get embroiled in this whole thing. So like everything is illegal. So you can't be out if you're married, or you can't do this and you can't do that. Everything is frowned upon. And so you end up having this twisted logic, and nobody can really discover what exactly happened, and nobody can be honest about what went down with this girl because the system won't allow it. And it's a really fascinating, really well-written movie about, this whole thing. It's like a social commentary.
Yeah, I didn't get to see this one, but it definitely sounds interesting. Where would you rank it as far as his movies? I actually haven't seen any of his movies. I need to get on.
So I would recommend his movies, even to people who don't usually watch foreign films, because he's really good at writing these very like engaging, mysterious plots. So his movies always have a lot of twists and revelations and what happens next. So that makes them really appealing, I think, to a wider audience. So I would recommend them. I think this is one of his best. This and Separation, I think, are the 2 that I like the most.
Very cool.
He's got a new movie out, I think, right now called Everybody Knows with Penelope Cruz and Javier Bardem, which I haven't seen yet, but I want to see it.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Cool. All right. Well, my number 9 is The Secret of Kells. And I just got to interview animator Tom Moore on my channel, which was incredible, amazing. I love his animation are so beautiful. His attention to detail and the way that everything just kind of flows and moves is so beautiful. And I actually think this movie has gotten better with age, because I don't know, there's definitely some things that feel incredibly relevant about it, in the way that Kellock, the patriarch, I guess, of the movie, he is so scared. He's just operating off of fear, and he's building a wall, which obviously is somewhat relevant. And I like the way that he, as an animator, that he has lore without feeling the need to really explain it. He just trusts the audience that they'll be able to get that, oh, this character's sweet, or oh, this character is scary, or he doesn't waste time with just exposition, which a lot of time loses me about fantasy, because it becomes very boring. And they don't feel a need to sort of explain Osling, for instance, or explain the book. You just know that it's a special book, and that's it, and he's on a journey to get the ink, and that's it. That's all you need to know. And I think he also has really good, just pure characters as his lead, whether it's in Song of the Sea with Ben, and here with the little boy Brendan. And I think by the end, when he comes back and to his uncle, I think it works. I think it's emotionally moving, and I really think it's a beautiful little movie. I like Song of the Sea better, but I still think it's a strong, certainly first offering from Studio Cartoon Saloon, and from Telmore. So I really enjoy it.
Cool. I think it's a sweet movie too. The animation is gorgeous. The design is amazing.
Yeah.
I do think the story is a little slight and a little, I don't know. It just, I'm not totally into it, but I think it's good. I would recommend it for like kids. It feels like very much like a kids movie to me. Not so much like one that it's like, what people used to say about Pixar, like the whole family, like it's for kids, but adults will enjoy it too. I think I can appreciate the craftsmanship, but I would still say it's just like for kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it does kind of broach more mature topics of religion and some other things, but it definitely has those childlike elements that kids are going to. And it's really interesting because both of his movies have mature themes, but are very, very approachable for children. And like in Song in the Sea, which I do think is his masterpiece, I think it's better than this, but anyway, I think that it's the kind of movie you think, oh, is it too sad for kids? But every kid I've ever watched it with or recommended it to has loved it. So I don't think we sometimes give kids enough credit for these darker, some of these darker themes. But yeah, I'm fine with that. I just love what he's done for animation, and I'm just so excited for anything that Cartoon Saloon gives. I'm
definitely one of the exciting studios out there, independent sort of alternative animation to the big 3D computer animated houses.
Yes. And so if you want to listen to my interview with Tom Moore, I'll put a link in the description section. You can check it out, because I was so excited, of course. So what do you have for number 9?
Number 9 for me, also an animated movie. It's Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. The first movie by Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who are very famous nowadays after so many hits. The reason this is on my list, it's because it's very simple. I don't have much to say about it other than it is just so funny. I think it's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. I think there's so many jokes, one after the other. I love so much about it. I love the fact that it's a movie that just wants to be a cartoon, like it's really using sort of like the logic of old cartoons, the visuals of old cartoons, the animation style, the character design, everything is just cartoony, and it's comedy and it's funny. and I had such a blast watching it. I love it. It reminds me of like the great Looney Tunes cartoons almost. I love it so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when it first came out, I was not a fan of this movie because I felt like it kind of had a gimmick and then just kind of ran it into the ground a little bit. You know, the oh, it's raining food, we get it. But I have to say I didn't love the animation, the sort of the weird faces, the way it's sort of animated. But I have to say, like, it's grown on me over at times. I think it is a pretty funny satire on disaster movies. I mean, that's what it's trying to do. And so I still don't love it, but I definitely can see why it made your list and why you enjoy
I Yeah, I think the story of the movie is totally boilerplate, like animated movie or like comedy stuff. That
it.
it's not
Mhm.
particularly inspired. I don't think. I just think they do so many funny things with it. It's just
Mhm. Yeah.
a movie that wants to be funny, and I think on that front, it totally succeeds, like wildly.
Mhm. Yeah. So my number 8 is kind of I mean, I guess some of mine did well, but this is the most sort of traditional blockbuster on my list. I have Star Trek. I think they did a really good job. First of all, casting the movie, I think, was brilliant. Pretty much all the casting was great. And that's tough to do when you have such an iconic property and you're rebooting it, to get a new Kirk and a new Bones and a new all the things, and to have it be new Spock and have it be satisfying, I think was very well done. I think that it's just an entertaining blockbuster. It's got good action. I mean, JJ knows how to do this. He knows how to put together an entertaining blockbuster, and he did a good job,
Hmm.
in my
I
opinion.
agree. I agree. I agree basically with everything you said. I think it's a really good movie. I think it feels to me almost like I don't know, it's a good like measuring stick for the summer blockbuster. I think if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
like, how does this compare to Star Trek? Um,
Hmm.
I do think at the beginning, I'm a little, looking back at it, a little bummed out about the Uhura as a character, the way they portray
Yeah.
her in the movie, especially at the beginning. She just has this scene in which Kirk flirts with her, and he comes off as a big creep, in my opinion, rewatching it. And then she's got that scene in which she's like in her underwear or whatever. It doesn't seem like know what to do with her, and for her to be like a lady, I guess. But once the movie gets on the Enterprise, I think it like really moves and doesn't let go from there. I think everything that happens after they get on the ship is um, great. Like JJ, like you said, just going forward, moving without like any hiccups or any like stumbles. And I
Yeah.
think that's what makes the movie so good.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I didn't really like the Uhura Spock relationship in these movies, and it just I kind of I agree that they didn't really quite know what to do with her, which was a shame because the original Uhura was very groundbreaking in her an African American woman having that kind of role in a sci-fi show was
Mm-hmm.
very important, and people like
Definitely.
Oprah and many other people said that how meaningful that portrayal and that role was to them. So I don't know. Yeah, I agree. They kind of dropped on that one, but I agree. It's a really satisfying summer movie. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I
Definitely.
have it in mind.
Definitely.
So what do you have at number 8?
My number 8 is the movie Mother. Not the one with Jennifer Lawrence from a couple of years ago, but the one from 2009, which was directed by Jung Bung Ho. I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhat okay. He's a South Korean director. And this is a movie about a woman whose son is accused of murder, and she wants to prove that he didn't do it. Um, And the thing that I like so much about this movie is I guess it just feels very original in a couple of ways. First of all, I think Bong Joon-ho has this sort of uh, he likes to mix like comedy and like drama and horror and very violent things all in one place in weird unexpected ways. Like I feel like I think you watched this movie, right, Rachel, in
Yes, I
preparation?
did.
So I feel like, I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like in a lot of places in this movie, when you expect things to be very serious, there is suddenly a funny thing. Or like when everything is funny, then there's like this serious or violent thing that happens. And I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of like misdirection and a very playful use of those like tone shifts. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I can see that. I started out the movie really not liking it. I thought that he was really irritating, and I thought that she was kind of annoying. And I was just like, oh no, what did I get myself into watching this movie? But I have to say, once the case starts, I think it starts to work for me. And I think that it definitely takes you on places that are surprising, that it's not a typical underdog mystery kind of movie.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It So I definitely could see why you enjoyed it. It was very unpredictable, for sure.
Yes, I think it's also very well made. I feel like he's really good at like building up misdirection and tension and things like that. Like the scene with, do you remember the scene with the water bottle where she
Mhm.
has to, I feel like that scene is so tense and it's just about a water bottle. I don't know. I feel
Yeah.
like everything is very super well done. In terms of theme, I see it as this sort of idea of like family relationships versus sort of like broader justice. Like you have this woman who is willing to do anything for her son, um, regardless of whether or not he did the murder. Like she isn't 100% sure that he didn't do it. I guess she believes that he didn't do it, and that's why she's going to do anything to prove him innocent. And it's a very, I don't know, like interesting take on that sort of thing of like when our like I guess justice versus like our personal emotions and what we want to be true versus what is actually true. I don't know if you see
Mhm.
that also.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's an interesting pick, and it was a fun one to watch because I never would have watched it if it wasn't on your list. So that was fun. So number 7 for me is Fantastic Mr. Fox, and
Oh.
yes,
Mhm.
and yeah, I just think it's really charming. We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna punt that and talk about it later on
That's
on
right.
the list. But I love stop motion, and I love the attention to detail in stop motion and how they're able to create their whole little worlds with they literally create the world. Just think it's really cool, and so yeah, I have it at number 7.
Great. We'll talk about it later.
Yes. So what is your number 7?
My number 7 is the movie Dogtooth. And this is directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, who has become an unexpected success story in the US. He's made The Lobster and The Favorite, which was nominated for a bunch of Oscars last year. Um, but this is I think this is his first movie, maybe it's his second. Um, and it's this story basically about this family who lives in this secluded house, and the mom has basically decided that they want to protect their children, and so they don't let them out, and they tell them these kind of like rules about the world that are totally warped. They say certain words mean different things from what they actually mean. They don't let them watch any television or have any contact with the outside world. They say that if they go beyond the wall of the house, they're going to, it's like a danger zone where they're going to be eaten by animals or something. Cats are seen as like these vicious creatures that want to get you. And so this is all this paranoia about never leaving the house and all these rules about what they can and cannot do. And it's played out in a very creepy and yet kind of comedic way, which I think it's kind of like the Lantimos's
Mm-hmm.
his like brand of humor, which is really dark and really disturbing. Um, I think this movie works especially well if you see it as sort of like an introduction to a director who has a unique vision, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he's trying to do things that a lot of other directors have tried to do. Like I think of like a Lars von Trier or a Michael Haneke, who are really dark and go to these very dark, oppressive themes. But he actually does it in a way that really works for me. Those directors I don't usually love, but he has this like, because he has this like satirical, very darkly comic thing to it, I think it works much better for me. And it's just a package that I hadn't seen before. I feel it feels unique to me.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I haven't seen this one, but it definitely sounds interesting. So
Yeah.
All right. My number 6 is the movie Up in the Air. And I love Jason Reitman. You know my deep and abiding love for Juno. And I think what Jason Reitman does so well in most of his movies is he presents people who think they have everything figured out. They think they know everything. They think they have this sort of handle on the world, like Juno thinks that she knows what everybody should be doing and has it all figured out, and then her journey realizes she really doesn't know. And I think you have a similar sort of story here. We have this character played by George Clooney who thinks he has everything figured out. It starts out with him giving this whole speech about how life is a backpack, and you have the right things are these relationships sort of weighing you down, and what if you can be kind of free from that. And he's this guy who goes in and does these layoffs, and he thinks that he has sort of a handle on what people need, and that he is doing kind of a good thing. And then this Anna Kendrick comes in, and she wants to do it all by video conferencing, and she's just sort of this modern thinker, and he's so proud about the fact that he's just about to get this huge mileage. I forget how many, setting some like records or whatever, frequent flyer miles. And anyway, he thinks he has everything sort of figured out, and through the course of the movie, through this Anna Kendrick character, he realizes that he doesn't. And I particularly, when he takes this big risk and he goes to meet this woman that he's had this on-off again thing played by Vera Farmiga, and it turns out to not end up the way that he thinks the risk will pay off. I think that's actually quite devastating. And I think that sort of when he's giving the backpack speech at the end and he realizes he doesn't believe it anymore, I think it's really moving. And I think it's such a good sort of capture of sort of modern American work. And work is a big kind of theme of mine that I like in movies, when people talk about our motivations for work, why we overwork, all this different stuff is one of my favorite themes. And I think that Anna Kendrick is wonderful in the role that she has, and Vera Farmiga is really good, and I think George Clooney, it's perfect. I mean, this is the role that kind of roles he was born to play. I think he just gets that sort of tired, world weary kind of guy down, but you still like him because he's a likable actor. And so anyway, I really think it's great, and so I have it at 6.
Yeah, I think you know that I'm not the biggest fan of this movie. I think as a story, in the broad sense, I think it's okay. It works. We've seen stories like this of a guy who's like too much into his work and hasn't really opened up to relationships and that sort of thing. So I think that part is fine, but I think the thing that doesn't really work for me is making it about this guy who fires people for a living. And then 2009 was right after the recession happened, and in the movie they make this choice of having real people who actually lost their jobs be like sort of interviewed in certain scenes and play themselves. And there's this whole thing of like being angry about being fired and why am I getting fired. And some of the people that George Clooney fires in the movie are played by actual people, and that sort of thing. And I think putting those things in comparison, I just think I don't think it works anymore. I think at that point I'm much more interested in those people, and I don't really feel like I want to follow George Clooney, and I don't really care about his personal thing. There's this whole thing that's going on around him in which all these people are getting fired and he's doing this horrible thing. And sure, doing it over Skype is going to be a little less personal, but what he's doing is also not that personal at all. He's just some rando who's showing up to fire people that he didn't even work with. So I don't know. That's the thing that I feel like I feel like it's a concept for satire, and the movie wants to be more of a like romantic comedy, like genuine thing. And the mix doesn't really work for me somehow.
I actually think that he comes to realize by the end that what he thought was the kind of way to do it is not actually. I think he comes to that realization by the end. But I just think it's a really well written and well acted look at sort of modern work, and also just how this person thinks they have everything figured out but actually really doesn't. So but yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just agree to disagree on this one, because I think it's really great.
Mhm.
And I really like I really like his journey in the story. So anyway, what
All
did
right,
you have at
moving on.
what did you have at number 6?
At number 6, a movie that I assume you haven't seen and probably will not, which is Inglorious Bastards by
No.
Quentin Tarantino.
Right.
It's I just, for some reason, I assume that Tarantino is not your bag, and I'm pretty sure that's correct. I don't know if we have actually
Yes.
talked about it, but he doesn't seem to be the kind of director you would enjoy regardless.
No.
But this is the movie that he made basically about World War II and this sort of revenge plan to kill Hitler. And, interesting, in 2009, when I first saw the movie, the idea of like taking revenge of the Nazis seemed like an abstract thing to do, but now it feels like a little more um, prescient in some ways for me personally. Feels more irrelevant than it did in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
um, and it has this like um, it feels more urgent in that way. But regardless of that, I just think it's a very bold movie. I don't always love Tarantino. I think his last couple movies have been kind of too messy and don't really work for me. But this, I think, really does. And I think part of it is it's the last movie that he made with his editor, Sally Menke, before she passed away, sadly. She was really young. She was in her 50s, I think.
Mm.
Um, but she was his collaborator from the beginning, and she was his editor. And she is brilliant. And I think she really understood the rhythms of Tarantino and what he was trying to do. And in this movie, you have these really long conversations that are building up to like very tense moments, and like there's so much suspense and all of that. I think she really knows how to work with him. I think the movies that he's made since feel overlong and like they're repetitive and they don't really get to where they want to go and indulgent. I think she really knew how to trim him into a really nice package. I think this movie is fun. If you're into that kind of movie, if you like his sort of things, I think you will like this. It is a little bit. I think there's like questions of like whether or not it's acceptable and like in good taste, the kinds of things that he does in portraying World War II. That's a bigger conversation, I think. I just think it's very bold and it's very unique and it works for me. So I have it number 6.
Cool. Yeah, I've only started watching Pulp Fiction, and tried to start watching it like twice, and I was just both times I'm like, it's not for me. And so that's the
Yeah.
only one of his movies that everyone else I'm just like, I don't think so. I don't think it's for me.
Yeah, I don't
So,
know. I don't know if there's a Tarantino movie for you. I'm gonna think on that. If there's one that maybe, I think the closest one that you would like, there still has a lot of content that I don't think you would be really into, but Jackie Brown is kind of a love story in a lot of
mhm,
ways. So that might
mhm.
be the one that I would recommend if I had to.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know.
Yeah, I've
Probably.
heard that actually from from a couple other people about Jackie Brown, so
Yeah.
that's interesting. But yeah, very cool. So my number 5 is sort of my surrealist crazy comedy. You had Cloudy with Chance. I have A Town Called
Mm-hmm.
Panic, which is this French movie, stop motion, that's so funny. I just died laughing from the very beginning when he gets all those bricks delivered. It's like 55 million or whatever, how many bricks. It's so many. And I don't know, just little gags that just pay off so well. Like the horse has this girlfriend horse, and she is just convinced he's not going to show up for these music lessons that he signed up for. And then throughout the whole movie, they'll be like under the sea or in different places, and he'll get a phone call from her, and he's like, "Where are you? Why aren't you at the lesson?" And I don't. That to me was just hilarious. It's definitely not for everybody. If you don't like, obviously they have a talking horse and a cowboy and a like. It's nonsensical, but it won't be for everybody. But I just think it's so funny, and you just really enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. I'm very glad that you brought up Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs because I think they would make a great double feature of like totally ridiculous, hilarious
Yeah.
animation. I really like this movie too. Right?
Yeah.
It's so crazy. Definitely, it's just so hyperactive. It just
Yeah.
like it's so loud and it's so many things going on, and but it's also so funny. If you're into its wavelength, I think you're just gonna have a blast.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very short too.
Yeah. Yes. It's based on a television show, I believe, in France. They have this television show. But yeah, if you kind of like sort of Monty Python, I think it's kind of
Hmm.
in that vein kind of absurdism that's just really, really funny. And
It's almost
oh, sorry.
sorry. I think it's almost like watching Monty Python if you're like fast forward and like it's twice the speed. I feel
Yeah.
like it's you know.
That's fair. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what did you have at number 5?
Number five for me is Everyone Else. This is a German movie,
Mm-hmm.
directed by Martin Ade, who directed a movie called Tony Erdmann a couple years ago, which was nominated, and critics really loved it. It's a really great, funny movie. This is
Uh-huh.
a little different. This is the movie she made before Tony Erdmann, and it's basically a story about a relationship. A guy and a girl. They're on vacation in somewhere in Italy, I believe, and they have rented this house. Well, actually, the house belongs to one of their parents. But anyway, they're in this house, and basically, we follow them for like about 2 days as they like have this moment in their relationship, and they just have to, because they're isolated from their world, and it's just the two of them. They really start to think about this relationship and what it means to them and what's going on. The thing that's really impressive to me about this movie is I think one of the best movies that I've seen at depicting the sort of intimacy and the detail of like a romantic relationship that has been going on for a while. I think it's really, really truthful about the little things that you start to think about when you've been with a person for a long time, and the little things that it
Mm-hmm.
start to annoy you, and the insecurities, and this whole question of like, should we be together or should we not be together? What would be better for us? And the movie has an interesting way of, I think one can come out of the movie thinking either thing. I think some people will conclude these people shouldn't be together. Some people will conclude these people should be together. They can make it work. And I think that's one of the really fascinating movies. It's, if you like this sort of thing, I would compare it to something like the Before movies, the Before Sunset Moon, especially the last one, Before Midnight, since
Mm-hmm.
it's really about like assessing this relationship. If you're into that kind of thing, I think you will enjoy this movie. I think it's beautiful. It touched me in a very personal way. I think it's really beautifully made. It's not a big, splashy movie. It's very small, very intimate, but wonderful. It's called Everyone Else.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. I didn't get to see that one, but yeah, it sounds good. All right. My number 4 is the movie Coraline. I really like this movie because, first of all, visually, it's just so beautiful. The stop motion. from like it's really scary. It's a true, I think, horror movie for kids, which I admire and respect that they went for it. As far as that, I mean, the button eyes is pretty scary for kids, I think. And I guess what I really appreciate about the movie is that Coraline, her real parents are kind of the worst and really don't take good care of her, and they don't give her much reason to love them. But I think it's admirable that the script kind of makes her fight for them anyway, and it's really easy to fight for people that are really lovable. It's harder to fight for people that aren't that lovable, and I think that that she could so easily give into the button people, but she recognizes that even though her parents are very flawed, they are real, they're real, and so she doesn't give in to the button people.
Good. I think it's good too. I don't know why it is, for some reason, and I really can't put my finger on it. I just don't connect with the movie the way that I want to. I appreciate a lot of things about it, and it just doesn't click for me to the next level. I do think it's a good movie. I think it's definitely beautiful looking. I think Henry Selick is an amazing director, wonderful animator, and everything looks amazing. It is, to this day, the best 3D movie that I've ever seen. And I haven't seen that many movies in 3D, to be honest, but this one, like even more so than Avatar or How to Train Your Dragon, I think it looked amazing in 3D when I saw it in the theater. I just think stop motion lends itself so well to 3D, and Henry Selick does an amazing job. Like, especially when the spider webs come in and she's like, the tunnels and that sort of thing. That is such a wonderful thing to see in 3D because it really benefits from, the depths of that sort of thing.
Well, and it does such a good job of creating tone and atmosphere. I did a video a while back on movies I thought had great atmosphere, and I included Coraline because I think it just does such a good job of creating this atmosphere, and I just really like Coraline as a character. I think she's really cool. And so so what do you have at number 4?
Let me see. Number 4 for me is Bright Star. So Bright Star, directed by Jane Campion, got nominated for Best Costume Design at the Oscars in 2009. Its only nomination. And it lost. It should have been nominated for every single award almost at the Oscars in 2009. It only was nominated for one, and it couldn't even win it, even though it totally deserves it because the dresses are part of the story. The protagonist of the movie, Fanny, is a dressmaker. And she makes this, it's the whole point that she makes these extravagant dresses that are different from everyone else. And even though I don't know anything about fashion from that time, I can see these dresses and I know that they're different from everyone else's dresses and in which ways, and why they feel like a little off to everyone else. I think that's brilliant. But anyway, in a broader sense, Bright Star is this amazing love story, romance between Fanny and the poet John Keats. And I think it's just like a swoon of romance. I feel like it's one of the most romantic movies I've ever seen. Especially, I think it's really great at making these visual representations of what love feels like. I think of 2 scenes in particular. There's which Fanny is on her bed, I think she's writing a letter or something, and then this sort of breeze through the window, and the light changes, and the curtain goes up, and she's feeling the breeze in her face, and it's such a thing of a new breath into her room, into her world that has changed now that she's in love. I think it's just a beautiful, portraying in images and in sounds the feelings of being in love. And I think that's what this movie does so well.
Yeah, if I had known that this was on your list, I would have put it on my list. This is a great movie. It's so poetic. I mean, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, with obviously about a poet, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really beautiful, and their connection, their chemistry is so great. And it's obvious, it's sad, but I don't know, it earns all of its emotion. It's really good. I really like it.
Yes.
Very good choice. All right, well, my number 3 is Where the Wild Things Are. And this was a really interesting movie because I went to see it with my brother-in-law, my sister, and my 2 sisters and my brother-in-law. So there were 4 of us. 2 of us loved it, thought it was incredible. Then the 2 of them didn't like it at all. It was one of the most polarizing sort of films that I can think of as far as immediate reaction out of the theater. And the thing I really related to about it is this whole idea of like being out of control. And that's a big theme of the movie, is you're out of control. And I can remember as a kid just being so frustrated, like, why won't anybody listen to me? Like, in my mind, I had interesting ideas. In my mind, I had thoughtful ideas. Why did nobody care what I think? Nobody cared what I wanted out of the world. And there's so many moments in this movie where the little boy, he is just trying to be listened to. He's trying to make some sense. And because he's not listened to, he feels out of control, and he is out of control. And he gets to learn from being the king of these creatures. He gets to learn about his mother, and his mother becomes a real person to him because he realizes that she doesn't have control either. And just like he didn't have control of the creatures and of the wild things. And I just love it. I love this movie. I love the fact they didn't go CGI, and they used, creature effects from Jim Henson. I love all the vocal performances. They're so great. I love the whole idea of the son dying and like feeling out of control. And there was one time when I was in high school, I remember just being so frustrated at my family because everybody in my family was very, very different from me. And I remember saying to them, like, at school, I'm the normal one, but then I come home and I'm the weird one. Like, I remember telling them, I said, you all are the weird ones. I'm the normal one. And obviously that's not like an effective thing to say, but it was how I was feeling at the time when you just feel like nobody's listening to you and just very frustrated. And it just captures that emotion of childhood and growing up, I think, better than almost anything I can think of.
Mm-hmm. The reason I'm being so silent is because we will talk about it again.
That's
soon.
right. I forgot. Yeah. Okay, good. So what do you have at 3?
And number 3, I have Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Okay, good.
Directed by Wes Anderson, adapted from the Roald Dahl book. And have you ever read that book, Rachel?
Yeah.
How do you think it works as an adaptation? Because I haven't read that particular Roald Dahl.
I think it's the best Roald Dahl adaptation, actually, as far as book to movie. It's pretty close. And Roald Dahl is very, very difficult to adapt to movies because he has this darkness to him that kids really like, but that when it's portrayed visually as opposed to listening or reading it, it just is weird. It's just hard. And I think that they managed to get enough whimsy because of Wes Anderson's style that I think it does a good job with that transition. I mean, the problem with Roald Dahl is you can either add too much whimsy, like the BFG did, in my opinion, or you can not add enough, and it ends up being, even though I like the film, something like Matilda or something like that, that's a little, I think it's too far with, it gets a little mean spirited. So I don't know. It's tricky. It's very difficult, but I think this adds the right amount of whimsy to make the story work. And it's just so detailed with the stop motion that I really do enjoy it as well.
Yeah. I love it. I think stop motion is really perfect, medium for Wes Anderson because he can be as like micromanaging with all the
Yeah.
details as he wants, and he can have a great time because the movie is full of all these funny, clever little things and so playful. I think it's very clever. I love the animation of the fur, which is something that people would usually avoid because it's not going to look perfect in stop motion because the fur is always going to be like moving a little bit. But I think Wes Anderson was into that, and he is into the idea of letting you know that these things are puppets and they're animated and it's not like reality, and he has a lot of fun with that, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
I also really love the character of Ash, played by Jason Schwartzman. He's the son.
Mm-hmm.
um, I think his whole frustration is really funny, and he's really
Yeah.
adorable and relatable too.
Yeah. And I really like the whole cuss cuss joke. I think that's really funny. They use
The
it a
whole
lot.
what?
The cuss cuss instead
Oh
of
yes.
saying cuss cuss.
Oh, that
I
is so good.
yeah.
There's so many great um, details. Like I love the fact that when they're all these like civilized animals, but when they eat, they like turn into like complete like
Mhm.
wild things, and they're just like eating
Right.
their food.
Yeah.
I think it's so funny.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, it's really fun. I obviously it's on my list, so I really enjoy it. So it's really good.
Mm.
All right. So my number two is The 500 Days of Summer. This is a movie that I just love. I think that I mean, they say right at the beginning that it's not a love story, and and yet it has a lot of the trappings of a love story. But I think that it just turns sort of the romantic comedy on its head. And I think it's one of the only uses of nonlinear storytelling that I actually like. I think putting sort of the pieces together of this relationship is really interesting. And I love just some of the creative touches that it has. Like I love the whole sequence on expectation versus reality. I think is brilliant.
Mm.
I love that whole scene. I love just, I don't know, like when it all of a sudden becomes a sketch and a drawing and a painting. I think that's really fun, and just has all these sort of creative touches that are really cool. When he does the musical number, was really fun, and with the animated bird. And
Right.
I love the two of their performances. Like, yes, she's a total manic pixie dream girl, but I don't really care. I like it. And I like the fact that it's kind of dared to go with it, with the ending, with the sort of untidy ending, because it's what this characters and the story actually needs. But a lot of movies wouldn't dare to kind of do that and would want to give a happy ending to the thing. But I just think it's sort of pitch perfect with them sitting there on that bench and realizing that they needed each other for that time, and they learned something from the experience, but they were not, it was not meant to be. And I mean, I think they dare to sort of make her sometimes an unlikable character with what she does, the way that they treat each other, which makes it feel kind of raw and real to me, despite it having a lot of whimsical elements. And I don't know, I love it. I think it's great.
Mm. I watched this last night in preparation for today.
Okay.
Back in 2009, this was one of my favorite movies of the year.
Yeah.
It was Inglorious Basterds, Star Trek, and this were my favorites. Um, I think more than any other movie on our lists, this seems to me like the one that feels the most like 2009,
Mm-hmm.
and that it has aged in very weird ways for me. Um, I think it works, but I think its perspective. I just feel like if it were made today, it wouldn't go like this. Like I feel like it's a little too close to the male character's perspective, and it's not. I feel like if it was done today, it would question a little more some of its perspective on how it's depicting the summer character and some of the things that the guy does. But I still think it kind of works despite of all the things that have not aged so well about it. I don't want to go on too much about it because I don't feel like it's the moment for
Mm-hmm.
it. I agree with you that some of the choices are really inspired. The musical number, the expectations versus reality. Um, I think it's aged in weird ways. I don't know how to talk about it. I just saw it last night, so I think if I was really gonna talk about the things that worked for me back then that don't anymore now, I would really have to think about it.
Mm.
So I'm just gonna
Okay.
say it's a fun movie for sure. Um, the only thing that I will say is that I had forgotten this movie features Chloe Grace Moretz, who is my nemesis.
Oh, you hate her.
And it's not that I hate her, but like there's something about her. I don't know what it is. And in this movie, she plays like this precocious little kid, which is also one of my worst type of characters. So that was the part that I think was the roughest for me. I had forgotten totally that
Hmm.
she was in it. And then when I saw her, I was like, oh no, Chloe Grace Moretz.
Fair enough. We all have those ones
Yeah.
that we're drawn to more than others. So what do you have at number two?
My number two is Drag Me to Hell,
Yeah.
with director Sam Raimi. And it's this movie, very simple, about this woman who makes the wrong decision and she mistreats this like old lady. And guess what? The old lady puts a curse on her, and now she's being dragged to hell and has to stop it. Um, I just think this movie rules. I just think
Mm.
it's so much fun. I think the back and forth between comedy and horror is so fun. This is one of the most memorable experiences I've had at the movie theater ever. Like I remember when I went to see it, I had never been like so had this feeling of like any moment I could be either laughing out loud or like super tense because something horrible and scary is about to happen. And
Mhm.
I carry that experience to this day. And I rewatched this earlier this year to prepare for this episode, and I just had a blast with it. I just think it's such a tight, effective little horror movie that is also a lot of fun and funny, and I just think it rules.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So I watched this for this episode, and I think it's one of those ones that's why this kind of exercise is helpful, because I would never have watched this movie without this encouragement, because I don't like possession movies like The
Mm-hmm.
Exorcist or things. I don't like that at all. And so I just, the title alone was like, I don't know, I'm not gonna like it. But I actually found it really fun. I was very surprised, and I thought it was genuinely funny, and even some of the sort of gross elements to it I think kind of are fun, like in the way that, I don't know, like a kid playing with slime, and kind of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
gross in that kind of fun, sort of immature, like he kind of a way. It's
Yeah.
fun. And I think I realized that horror comedy is definitely more my jam than
Mm.
horror.
Right.
I was thinking about it. Yeah, that I like with like a touch of over the topness is what I like.
Yes. I also think one more thing I want to bring up is I feel like this is a very well written movie, and we don't really seem to think of horror or like purely popcorn entertainment movies as well written. But I think the screenplay is very tight, and it's very like everything that is set up is paid off later, and everything, I feel like there's not a scene that doesn't make sense, or that it's not supposed to be there, or that it's like just padding. It just feels like very well written, like it's very lean. I
Mhm.
really like that about it too.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It was a big surprise. So thanks for recommending it to me. That was fun.
I'm glad you
Uh,
liked it.
yeah. So all right, big news. My number one is Up. Pixar's Up. Pixar's Up. For a long time, I've always said it's my favorite movie, like not just of 2009. I absolutely love this movie, and a lot of people love the first 10 minutes, which I think are or so the brilliant married life sequence. I love that. I think it's so great. But I also think the whole movie is great, not just that first 10 minutes. I I love the whole thing with Carl. Sort of, he has all of this regret of what he wishes he could have given Ellie, but he wasn't able to give her. And the fact that their dreams were constantly getting literally crashed through, like they had come in to break that safe that they had. And and he always felt like he didn't give her the life that she deserved, and so he has this regret that's just weighing him down. And so he finally does this crazy thing with this house, and obviously you have to be willing to suspend disbelief to, enjoy the film. And you've got Russell and Kevin and all of this fun stuff kind of there that's really charming. And I had a very special relationship with my grandpa, who was just my hero in life. And whenever I watch this movie, even though he wasn't really like Carl hardly at all, I don't know, for some reason it makes me think of him and just how loving he was, and the way that Carl loves Ellie, it makes me think of my grandpa. And I love it. I love the music. I love at the end when he sees Ellie's note to him in the book, and keep on, go have another great adventure. And then he realizes that he can be basically a father figure for Russell. And I think it's so sweet. And it just gets me every time when he reads that in that book. And I actually had when I bought my house, I had a whole Up themed housewarming party where I had my own adventure book, and I actually had a full Up cake designed for me, which was like a dream. I'd always wanted to have a fancy cake. And so that was memorable. And I just love it. I think it's great. And it's just a movie that I can put on any day and just feel good. And so I love it.
Great. I think it's a lovely, lovely movie. I also really, really like Up. I actually had thought in the years since I last saw it, which was probably in 2009 or thereabouts, I had almost cooled off on it a little bit, and I didn't remember it as one of the best Pixar movies or a movie that I particularly loved or anything like that. But rewatching it, I was really surprised that I had, kind of forgotten about it, because I actually think it's really great. I guess I'm a little bit in the minority, or at least like you. I actually think the beginning, like you say, it's very daring, the whole married life thing, and it's a great way for the setup. But I think the real stuff is later. I really love that it's this sort of adventure thing, that it's just the two guys are going on this adventure, and there's a bird, and then there's a dog, and then this happens. And I don't know, it feels like something that I really like this time around is that it feels very sort of simple and loose and playful in a way that I think, and a lot of people might disagree with me, but I think Pixar has gone in a very overbearing direction, I feel like, in a lot of movies. And it feels like there's a lot of world building, a lot of plotting, and maybe too much of it. I think something like Up is more the kind of thing that I'm into, in which you're just sort of going in an adventure, and there's some set pieces, and there's funny things, but it's not doesn't have to be this huge overbearing thing.
Yeah.
And I agree with you with the thing with the note. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. I cry like a baby every time.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm so excited for Pete Docter to now be running Pixar. I cannot wait to see what is happening already with the Spark shorts. He's getting some new creative energy into the studio, and I love his movies. I think he's just hit it. I think Inside Out is brilliant. I love Up, and I think Monsters Inc. is really solid. So I don't know. I just think that he's just a really great director, and it just has such warmth to it. And it can be quite funny at times. And they do have a huge plot hole with Muntz being the same kind of age when he was watching him as an adult, when he was a child, like Carl was watching him as a child, where now they're basically the same age.
I thought that I can buy that. I don't think that's a huge plot hole. He's just a little older, when you get older, the age difference is not that big anymore. It doesn't look, two old people don't look that different from each other.
But the reason why they did that was because originally they were going to have Kevin's eggs be like a fountain of youth kind of a thing. But it was just too distracting from the overall plot. And so they said, we're just going to trust that we've done enough goodwill that people will forgive
Right.
this, and I have no problem forgiving it. I mean, you're
Yeah,
already
me either.
believing that a house could, on these balloons and stuff, and it's fine with me. But anyway, it's just one of my favorite movies of all time. I
Yeah,
absolutely
also Kevin. We need to talk about Kevin.
yeah,
Kevin is a legend. I love
yeah,
Kevin.
yeah,
He's so funny and he's so well animated. The animation on Kevin is incredible.
yeah.
Such a physical, presence.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, best supporting actor or
Yeah.
actress, actually.
Yes, that's
I'm
right.
gonna say Kevin is my best supporting actress for 2009.
And I know a lot of people hate the dogs. But I like the dog. I think they're funny. I like so
But the communicator that is broken
yeah,
and whatever.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
like
like the
it.
dogs.
So what do you? This is very exciting. I guess we
Mhm.
already kind of know, but what is your number one?
My number one is Where the Wild Things
Oh my
Are.
gosh, I'm so excited.
And let me tell you something. Back in 2009, I saw the trailer for Where the Wild Things Are. And I had never read the book as a kid, but
Uh,
I saw the trailer and I was so excited. It felt like it was this movie that was on my wavelength. Like the idea of having these huge puppets and only the faces be CGI and this whole aesthetic and have the Arcade Fire soundtrack and everything. It is an amazing trailer, just regardless of whether or not you like the
mhm,
movie. I was so excited for the movie. I was maybe too excited, or maybe I was just too young. I don't know. But when I saw it, I was a bit of a disappointment. So I
uh-huh,
had always had it in the back of my mind that this movie that I wanted to be so great, but it just wasn't.
uh-huh.
But this time, I watched it in preparation for this, and suddenly everything sort of aligned and it clicked for me, and I got it. And I don't know how that happened, but it just worked for me this time, and it was like it was just an emotional experience.
Uh,
I was totally transported. I agree with what you say about this whole idea of this little angry boy and having no control and feeling like helpless, like you have no power, and so, like the frustrations of being a kid. And then you have this whole like I love the Wild Things as in
yeah,
design and in personalities. I feel like each of them is so funny and so unique, and they bring their own thing to dynamic, and they like represent all these things that children would do. Like there's the angry kid, and then there's like sort of like the almost like the insecure kid, and the like more quiet kid, and that um, and then there's this whole emotional element that I
mhm,
love about um, I don't know. It just works for me so well. I
mhm,
do love James Gandolfini as Carol.
mhm,
His performance. If Kevin is my supporting actor, then Gandolfini is my supporting actor.
mhm,
I think he did such an incredible job. And obviously, I don't know if you ever watched The Sopranos, but like at this point, he was mostly known for playing Tony Soprano on television. And
mhm.
Carol is kind of like Tony Soprano in that, that guy is basically like a big overgrown kid and you have this like monster, but in totally different register from his job on the TV show, in which he's so sweet and sometimes he's out of control in this movie, but he's also so innocent and he means well. And I don't know, it's just it just connects with me
Mhm,
somehow,
mhm.
that emotion.
Yeah, I love the scene when they're talking and the little boy, I forget his name in the movie, but that
Max.
he Max, that's right. And he uh tells him about the sun and
Mm.
how like immediately concerned uh that Carol is about that and how worried he is. And they really capture that whole worry of
But
childhood.
he doesn't show him. That's the what I find so touching about that scene is that Carol says like, "How are you going to be worried about the sun? It's just this tiny little thing," and sort of like to calm Max
Yeah,
down. But then you see his face, and you can see that he's really worried about it too,
yeah,
right? And
right.
I think that is such a I don't know that stuck with me so much because
Yeah,
that's so truthful of like life as a kid. I feel like
yeah.
and
It's so
understanding the world.
like I remember as a kid reading something like The Diary of Anne Frank and just being so worried about how people could do that and how that could happen
Hmm.
and being very upset. And I remember I mean I've been an insomniac literally my entire life. Even when I was a baby I didn't sleep well. I've never slept well my whole
Oh
life.
wow.
and I, as a kid, I used to just sit up at night and just stare at the ceiling and just think about these things, and just wonder why people were like that, and why people, couldn't be better and couldn't be and I there's kind of a famous story of my mom coming in and seeing me as out of sleep, and she's like, go to sleep. I'm sure I was very frustrated as a parent, but I said I said to her, go away, I'm thinking. And she's like, okay, fine. And so I don't know, I think this movie captures that part of childhood just so well, and I'm so excited that you kind of rediscovered it. That's really cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm very happy about it. It was such a lovely experience. So
Yeah.
I guess to anyone who maybe was on the fence back in 2009, maybe give it another shot. You never know.
Yeah. It's at the very least a movie that makes interesting choices. So I think you'd, even if you don't love it like we love it, I think you'd be fascinated by it and the choices it makes. So very good. Well, there you go. We've got our list. Let's quickly go over our picks. So number 10, I have Young Victoria. Number 9, Secret of Kells. Number 8, Star Trek. Number 7, Fantastic Mr. Fox. 6, Up in the Air. 5, A Town Called Panic. 4, Coraline. 3, Where the Wild Things Are. 2, 500 Days of Summer. Number 1, Up.
All right. And my list is number 10, About Ellie. Number 9, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Number 8, Mother. Number 7, Dogtooth. Number 6, Inglorious Basterds. Number 5, Everyone Else. Number 4, Bright Star. Number 3, The Fantastic Mr. Fox. Number 2, Drag Me to Hell. And number 1, Where the Wild Things Are.
Yay. All right. Well, great. This has been really fun. I really enjoyed doing this. And so thanks so much. And where can people find you?
People can find me on Twitter, and that would be under the handle Coco Hits New York. You can also go on my blog, which is cocohitsny.wordpress.com. And you can find me on Letterboxd too if you're into that.
Yeah, and I'll have links for all that in the description section. Definitely check that out. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, and on Rotten Tomatoes, and on iTunes and YouTube. So definitely please check that out. If you're listening on iTunes, if you can give us your ratings and reviews, really appreciate it. And if you are listening on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We sure appreciate it. And check us out. We're going to be starting doing our second episode of the Criterion Project once the channel starts up next week. So that will be really fun. So definitely check that out. And thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
I'll be back.
Yes. All right. Bye.